You know what's interesting about highly intelligent people? They rarely look the way we expect them to. We often imagine someone with a very high IQ as obviously brilliant, constantly speaking, solving complex problems out loud, or openly displaying their knowledge in a way that's easy to recognize. Someone you can immediately identify. But psychology suggests something very different. Many people with extremely high intelligence actually display subtle behavioral patterns. Patterns that don't always look like intelligence at first glance. In fact, they can sometimes look like the opposite. Quietness may be mistaken for disinterest. Pauses may be seen as hesitation. Observation may be confused with passivity. But beneath that surface, something else is happening. Cognitive psychologists often point out that intelligence is less about what you know and more about how your brain processes the world. And that processing doesn't always show up in obvious ways. It reveals itself through small, everyday habits, patterns of thinking, patterns of behavior, patterns that most people overlook or misunderstand entirely. Here are 10 surprisingly common habits often found in people with very high IQ. Number 1. Spending a lot of time alone. Highly intelligent people are often comfortable with solitude, not because they dislike others, but because their brains are constantly active, always processing, always connecting ideas, always running internal simulations. And that kind of mental activity requires space. Solitude gives the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, reflection, and complex thinking, the room it needs to function properly, without interruption, without noise. Research from the London School of Economics even found that highly intelligent individuals tend to feel less satisfied with frequent social interaction compared to others. Not because social interaction is unpleasant, but because it competes with something else, their internal world, which is often more engaging, more demanding, and harder to step away from. Number 2, constant curiosity. People with high IQs tend to ask questions about almost everything. Not just big philosophical questions, but small, everyday ones that most people ignore. Why do people behave this way? Why does this system work like that? Why does this pattern keep repeating? Their brain doesn't settle easily. It searches, naturally, automatically. Because at a cognitive level, it's trying to detect structure in what appears random. Curiosity becomes more than just interest. It becomes a kind of mental engine, always running in the background, always pushing for deeper understanding, even when there's no immediate reward for finding an answer. Number 3, talking to themselves. This might sound strange at first, even slightly unsettling, but in psychology, it's known as self-directed speech, and it serves a very specific purpose. Studies show that talking to yourself can improve focus and cognitive control. It helps the brain organize thoughts, clarify ideas, strengthen working memory. Instead of thoughts remaining scattered, they're structured, externalized, refined. So when you see someone quietly narrating their own thinking, repeating something under their breath, or walking through a problem out loud, it may not be distraction. It may be a sign of an active cognitive system, trying to bring order to complexity. Number 4, being comfortable saying, "I don't know." This is where intelligence becomes less visible and more counterintuitive. People with very high intelligence often understand the limits of their knowledge. They recognize how much complexity exists in the world, how many variables remain unseen, how many systems are only partially understood. In psychology, this connects to the Dunning-Kruger effect, the tendency for less knowledgeable individuals to overestimate what they know. But highly intelligent individuals often move in the opposite direction. They underestimate certainty. They question their own conclusions, and they're comfortable admitting when something isn't clear. Saying, "I don't know," isn't hesitation. It's precision. It's the refusal to simplify something that isn't simple. And in a world that rewards quick answers, That kind of restraint can look unusual, even unsettling, because it reveals something most people try to avoid: the awareness of how much there is left to understand. Number 5. Overthinking small things. An analytical brain rarely turns off. The same cognitive processes that help solve complex problems don't simply disappear when the situation becomes simple. They continue running. Conversations get replayed, decisions get revisited, possibilities get expanded far beyond what's necessary. From the outside, this can look like indecision, hesitation, second-guessing. But internally, something more structured is happening. The brain is exploring multiple scenarios at once, testing outcomes, evaluating variables, comparing possibilities. It's not confusion, it's depth. A single moment is rarely treated as a single moment. It becomes a network of interpretations. And while this can be useful in problem solving, it can also make even small decisions feel complex. Number 6. A strong sense of humor. At first glance, humor doesn't seem connected to intelligence. It feels light, effortless, almost instinctive. But cognitively, it's far more complex than it appears. To understand or create humor, the brain must recognize patterns and then break them. It must detect expectations, and then violate them in a way that still makes sense. This requires timing, abstraction, and the ability to connect ideas that don't normally belong together. Studies published in intelligence research journals have shown a measurable correlation between higher IQ and advanced humor processing. Because humor is not random, it's structured surprise. And recognizing that structure requires a certain level of cognitive flexibility. Number 7. Changing their minds when presented with new evidence. Most people treat their beliefs as fixed, something stable, something to defend. But highly intelligent individuals often approach beliefs differently. They see them as models, temporary frameworks used to understand the world. And when new information appears, they adjust. Not reluctantly, but naturally. In psychology, this is known as cognitive flexibility, the ability to update thinking without resistance, which is a key component of advanced problem solving. Because holding on to an outdated belief, simply because it's familiar, creates error. Now consider this for a moment. How often do we misinterpret this behavior? Someone who changes their mind may seem uncertain, unstable, even inconsistent. But sometimes, it's a sign that their thinking is still active, still evolving. Number 8. Late-night thinking. Many high IQ individuals report being more mentally active at night. When the environment becomes quieter, their thoughts become clearer. Fewer interruptions, less external input, more space for internal processing. Some researchers connect this pattern to evolutionary psychology, suggesting that individuals with higher cognitive flexibility are more likely to adapt to non-traditional routines, such as staying awake later. But beyond theory, the experience is simple. The mind feels uninterrupted. And in that uninterrupted state, ideas tend to flow more freely. Number 9. Observing more than speaking. Instead of immediately responding in conversations, highly intelligent people often pause. They watch. They notice patterns in behavior, tone of voice, timing, body language, subtle shifts in emotion. They gather information first and respond later. Because for them, interaction isn't just communication, it's data. This reflects strong pattern recognition, especially in social behavior. And while it may appear as quietness or even disengagement, it's often the opposite, a deeper level of attention. Number 10. Constant search for meaning. High intelligence often comes with an increased awareness of complexity, in systems, in relationships, in human behavior. And that awareness tends to create questions, not always spoken, not always urgent, but persistent. Why do people think the way they do? Why do patterns repeat? What actually drives behavior beneath the surface? It's not always philosophical in an obvious way. Sometimes it's quiet, a background process that never fully stops, a need to understand not just what is happening, but why. And perhaps that's the most interesting part of intelligence. It's not just about solving equations or remembering facts. At its core, intelligence is really about curiosity, a brain that keeps exploring patterns, questioning assumptions, trying to make sense of things that don't immediately make sense. Not because it has to, but because it can't stop. It continues searching, even when there's no clear answer. And once you start looking at intelligence this way, it becomes harder to recognize in the ways you're used to. It's not always loud. It's not always visible. Sometimes, it's just a quiet mind, still working in the background, trying to understand the strange, complex puzzle of human nature. Stay analytical.